Mr. Carter, who is that? Before she could even form a coherent question, she was gently ushered down a walkway toward a plane that looked nothing like the commercial jets she was used to. "Hold on, I think there's been a mistake," Elena finally managed to say, but the flight attendant had already taken her backpack. "Not to worry. Mr. Carter anticipated you might be running late. He's very understanding." The jet's interior made Elena's jaw drop. This was definitely not her budget flight to Atlantic City. "You're not Vanessa Jenkins," he said. It wasn't a question. "No, I'm Elena Morris," she replied, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "And I think I've just boarded the wrong plane." The man's stern expression faded, replaced by the hint of a smile. "So it seems." The jet's engines began to roar, and Elena felt a surge of panic rise in her chest. "I need to get off. I'm supposed to be on a flight to Atlantic City with my friend." "I'm afraid we've already been cleared for takeoff," he said, gesturing out the window where the ground crew was pulling away from the aircraft. "I'm Damien Carter, by the way." "Where is this plane going?" Elena asked, sinking into the seat across from him, her legs suddenly feeling too weak to stand. "Paris," Damien answered simply. "Paris, as in Paris, France?" Elena's voice rose an octave. Damien nodded, his eyes studying her intently. "You really did get on the wrong plane." He paused. "Looks like we have an impromptu journey ahead of us." The full reality of the situation hit Elena like a freight train. She was on a private jet to Paris with a complete stranger. "No, this can't be happening," she muttered, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "I need to call my friend. I have to find a way back. I have a shift on Monday, and there's Tommy. Here, drink this. It'll help." Damien's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, surprisingly gentle. He handed her a glass of water that seemed to appear out of thin air. Elena accepted it with trembling hands. "Mr. Carter, please, I can't go to Paris. I have my shift on Monday. I have my little brother to take care of. I have responsibilities." At the word, responsibilities, something in Damien's gaze shifted. He leaned back, studying her more intently, his initial amusement giving way to a deeper curiosity. "What do you do for a living, Elena Morris?" "I'm a nurse," she replied, almost automatically. "The ICU. My brother, Tommy, our parents passed away 2 years ago, and I'm all he has." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Why am I telling this man my life story?" "I understand responsibilities," Damien said, his voice low, carrying an unseen weight, probably more than most people. For a moment, they sat in silence as the jet ascended into the sky. Elena felt a strange mix of sheer terror and something else, a feeling she couldn't quite name. "Look," Damien finally said once the plane had leveled off, "we're going to Paris, like it or not. When we land, I can arrange to have you on the first flight back to wherever you need to go." "You do that?" Elena asked, surprised by his offer. "Of course. This mix-up isn't your fault." He paused, then added with a hint of that earlier smile. "That said, I am curious how you managed to get past private aviation security and onto my jet." Elena felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I was exhausted. I'd just finished a night shift and had barely slept. I saw a group of people at a gate and just followed them." "And no one stopped you or asked for ID?" "Someone called me Miss Jenkins. I tried to correct them, but everything happened so fast." Damien let out a low chuckle, a look of mingled amusement and admiration on his face. "Well, Miss Morris," he said, his tone teasing, "it seems you've single-handedly defeated a security system I pay millions to maintain. I'm impressed." Outside the window, the Atlantic was a vast, dark expanse. Inside, the air between Elena and Damien had shifted from tense to a strange, charged silence. Damien had returned to his tablet, but Elena had the distinct feeling he wasn't really working. He was watching her. Just as she was about to ask more about Paris, about his plans, a violent jolt jerked them both forward. The glass of water on the table slid across its surface, spilling everywhere. The cabin lights flickered wildly before switching to the dim glow of the emergency system. From the left engine, a strange, high-pitched grinding sound began to emanate, growing steadily louder. Elena froze, her heart plummeting to her stomach. The fear she had just managed to push aside came roaring back, 100 times more potent. What's happening?" she stammered, gripping the arms of her chair. Damien's reaction was the complete opposite. The surprise on his face was quickly replaced by an annoyed frown. He wasn't panicked, merely irritated. He pressed a button on the intercom. "Michael, status report." His voice was level and cold, without a hint of a tremor. The pilot's voice came over the speaker, calm but laced with urgency. "Mr. Carter, we have a hydraulic pressure fluctuation in the left engine. Nothing critical, but protocol requires we land for an inspection. The nearest airport is Gander, Newfoundland. We're requesting clearance for an emergency landing." Newfoundland. Elena had never even heard of the place. Damien exhaled sharply, a sound of pure frustration. "Acknowledged. Proceed." He cut the connection and turned to Elena, who was still pale. "Minor technical issue. We'll have to land in a small town in Canada." "Canada?" Elena repeated, her mind blank. From Atlantic City to Paris, and now somewhere in Canada. Her journey was becoming more absurd by the second. The plane began its descent. The turbulence and the grinding from the engine made every second stretch into an eternity. Finally, with a bone-rattling jolt, the wheels touched down. When the cabin door opened, a blast of frigid air flooded the interior. Outside wasn't a bustling international airport. There was just a lone runway, a few sparse, yellow lights, and all around them, a blanket of swirling snow that was growing thicker by the minute. They were stranded. An hour later, Damien ended his 10th phone call, his expression even tighter than before. "What is it?" Elena asked timidly. "The engine needs a replacement part," he replied, his voice clipped. "It has to be flown in from Montreal. The earliest it can get here is 1, maybe 2 days, depending on the weather." 2 days. Elena's hope for an immediate flight home evaporated. She sank into her seat, feeling utterly exhausted. The pilot entered, a few snowflakes melting in his hair. "Mr. Carter, I've spoken with the ground staff. A snowstorm is moving in. The only hotel in town is no 5-star resort, but they say it's clean and cozy. The owner's name is Maureen." Damien gazed out the window at the whiteout, enveloping his multi-million-dollar jet. He, a billionaire accustomed to presidential suites at the Ritz, was now holed up in an anonymous inn in the middle of nowhere. He turned back to Elena, who was huddled in her thin coat, looking utterly lost and vulnerable. For the first time on this trip, his perfect composure showed a crack. "All right," he said, his tone losing some of its icy edge. Little did he know, this reluctant decision would pull them from their world of wealth and technology, placing them in a simple setting where 2 strangers would be forced to confront each other with raw honesty. The inn was cozier than they'd expected. It was a 2-story log house with a large, crackling fireplace, but that warmth couldn't reach the icy dread solidifying in Elena's heart. Inside their modest, wood-paneled room, she began to pace. She pulled out her phone, holding it high, searching for a signal. A single, weak bar of service flickered for a moment before vanishing. "Damn it," she muttered. "The storm must be affecting the cell tower." Damien had been standing by the window, watching the white curtain of snow outside. He turned to see the look of near desperation on her face. "I have to let my brother, Tommy, know," Elena said, her voice trembling. "He'll be worried sick. And the hospital, I can't just disappear. My department head, Sarah, will have to cover my shifts. I can't put that burden on everyone." She sank onto the bed and buried her face in her hands, feeling completely helpless. Damien observed her in silence for a moment. Then, he calmly opened his carry-on case. He took out a rugged-looking black device, far more substantial than a regular phone. "Use this," he said, holding it out to her. "It's a satellite phone. It's not affected by the weather. Elena looked up, stunned at the device in his hand. It was like something from another world, a world where a problem like no service simply didn't exist. Her hand trembled as she dialed Tommy's number. He picked up on the first ring, his voice frantic. "Elena, where are you? Megan said you weren't on the plane." "Tommy, listen, I'm okay," Elena said, struggling to keep her voice steady as she briefly explained the mix-up and that she was safe in Canada after an issue with the plane. After reassuring her brother, she took a deep breath and called her department head. "Sarah, it's Elena. Something pretty unbelievable happened," she began, faltering, unsure how to explain her absurd situation. Seeing her struggle, Damien quietly held out his hand, offering to take the phone. Hesitantly, Elena passed it to him. He took it, and in an instant, his entire demeanor shifted. His voice became professional, polite, yet commanding. "Hello, this is Damien Carter," he said into the phone. "I am responsible for Miss Morris's current travel arrangements. Due to an unforeseen technical issue, her schedule has been impacted. We sincerely apologize for this inconvenience. My company will, of course, reimburse the hospital for any and all costs incurred by this disruption. We will provide an update as soon as possible." He spoke with crisp, unwavering authority. In just a few sentences, he had transformed a chaotic personal crisis into a manageable corporate incident. When Damien ended the call and handed the phone back, Elena looked at him in a completely new light. He was no longer just the stranger who had accidentally dragged her into this mess. He had just effortlessly lifted the two greatest weights from her shoulders. "Thank you, Damien." For the first time, she used his first name naturally, the formal distance between them closing. Damien just gave a slight nod, seeming unaccustomed to such direct gratitude. "You're welcome. It was the least I could do." The storm inside Elena had subsided. For the moment, her burdens had been lifted. Dinner that night wasn't luxurious room service, but a communal meal in the inn's living area. Maureen had cooked a large pot of beef stew, its savory aroma filling the entire house. "You two just make yourselves at home and eat with us," she said with a kind smile. "In a snowstorm like this, it's nice to have the extra company." Elena, used to rushed meals in the hospital break room, felt a genuine warmth spread through her. She naturally took a seat at the long wooden table, helping Maureen set out bowls. Damien followed, a bit awkwardly. He sat down, looking distinctly out of place amidst the simple, familial setting. The meal consisted of Maureen, her quiet husband Frank, and the two of them. They talked about the storm, the town's history, and Frank's hunting trips. Damien mostly listened in silence. He watched the way Elena chatted with Maureen, the way she laughed at one of Frank's old jokes. He saw that she wasn't trying to fit in, she simply was a part of it. For her, this was natural. After dinner, the storm had subsided. The sky was unusually clear, and the moon cast an ethereal silver glow on the fresh snow. The world outside was so quiet, you could hear the soft plop of snow falling from tree branches. "I need some air," Elena said, feeling overwhelmed after a long day. Damien didn't hesitate. "I'll go with you." They put on their coats and stepped out into the crisp, cold air. A silence enveloped them, but this time it wasn't awkward. There was only the sound of their boots sinking into the deep snow. "This place, it's so peaceful," Elena broke the silence. "So different from the city, so different from my world," Damien replied, his voice deeper than usual. He stopped, staring into the distance. "My world. Everything is a transaction, a calculation. People help each other for a price." Elena looked at him, seeing a genuine weariness in his eyes that his polished exterior couldn't hide. "That sounds lonely." Damien gave a small, sad smile. "It is." He took a deep breath, the cold air tightening his chest. "Ever since Mark died, I've just been running." "Mark?" Elena asked softly. "My best friend and business partner. He died in an accident. Since then, I just run. From work, from memories, from people. I thought I was just running from the pain. He stopped and looked directly at Elena. For the first time, she saw the vulnerability beneath the billionaire's armor. But maybe not, he continued, almost as if talking to himself. Being here, with you, I'm realizing I might not have just been running away. I was also searching for something. Something like this. He gestured with his chin toward the cozy inn, toward the quiet of the night. A real connection, without an agenda. Elena remained silent, offering no platitudes. As a nurse, she had seen enough grief to know that sometimes silence and a listening ear are the best medicine. It was in that moment, as the truest confessions were spoken amidst the pristine white wilderness, that they ceased to be Damien Carter, the billionaire, and Elena Morris, the nurse. They were just two people, sharing their deepest losses and longings, finding an unexpected kinship in the most unlikely of places. 2 days later, the flight from Newfoundland to Paris was completely different. The awkwardness was gone, the distance closed. They'd shared stories, fears, and even fits of laughter, as Elena recounted the tragicomic situations at the hospital. By the time the private jet's wheels touched down on the runway at Le Bourget airport, a genuine, fragile bond had been forged between them. Damien had arranged a suite for them at the Hotel George V, with a balcony overlooking the sparkling Eiffel Tower. The place was too luxurious, too overwhelming. It was a reminder that his world and hers were an ocean apart, both literally and figuratively. "You didn't have to do this," Elena said, gazing around the room that was larger than her entire apartment. "Consider it an apology for kidnapping you," Damien replied with the same warm smile she'd grown accustomed to in the snowbound town. "And a thank you." When Damien had to step out for a while, Elena decided to call the people worried about her. She stood on the balcony, breathing in the Parisian air, and dialed Tommy's number first. "Elena, you're really in Paris?" "No way." The boy's voice was electric with excitement. "Yeah, I'm here. Listen, everything's fine. I'll be home soon." "Who are you with?" "That guy you mentioned. What's his name?" "Carter." "Yeah, Damien Carter." "Wait, Damien Carter?" Tommy yelled into the phone. "The Damien Carter of the Atlas Corporation, the tech genius. People say he's a billionaire." "Are you kidding me?" Tommy's every word was like a douse of icy water. "Billionaire?" She mumbled an apology and hung up. With a trembling hand, she opened Damien's laptop, which was sitting on the desk, and typed the name into the search bar. The results flooded the screen. A torrent of articles, images, figures with too many zeros. Reclusive tech billionaire Damien Carter, founder of Atlas. Estimated net worth. She scrolled down, and her heart clenched when she saw an older headline. Tragedy of a tech genius. Damien Carter retreats from public eye after death of partner and best friend, Mark Renshaw. It all clicked into place. Mark, the pain, the loneliness. But it was all wrapped in a monumental lie. The warmth she'd felt in that snowbound town now felt like a sophisticated deception. The sincerity, the confessions. Was it all just part of a game for a bored billionaire? The suite door swung open. Damien walked in, holding a box of macarons. He smiled. "I thought you might like." His smile died when he saw Elena's face. She stood there, the laptop still glowing, her face drained of all color. "Why?" Her voice was ice. Damien glanced at the laptop screen, and he understood. He set the box down, his expression turning serious. "Elena, I can explain." "Explain?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Explain that you're a billionaire and you just forgot to mention it. That everything we talked about in that town, that connection, was built on a lie." "I didn't lie." Damien stepped closer. "I just didn't tell you the whole truth. Don't you see? If I'd told you who I was, you would have looked at me differently. Everyone does. They see the money, the power, not me. I just wanted, for once, to be treated like a normal person." His explanation sounded plausible, even pitiable. Elena's anger began to soften. But then another memory flashed, sharp as a shard of broken glass. Wait a minute. She took a step back, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. When I boarded the plane, your crew, they called me Miss Jenkins. You were there. You heard them. Silence filled the room. This time, Damien had no defense. His confidence crumbled. He let out a long sigh, heavy with defeat. Yes, he admitted, his voice hoarse. I knew you weren't Vanessa Jenkins from the start. That was the final blow. This wasn't an omission. This was a deliberate choice. Elena stared at him, a bitter sense of betrayal rising in her throat. Why? Why would you let me on the plane knowing it was a mistake? Damien looked directly at her, his eyes now stripped of their distance and power, holding only a raw, desperate longing. Because when you walked onto that jet, he said, his voice almost a whisper, you looked exhausted and lost, but you were real. You weren't like anyone I'd ever met. He paused, seeming to choose his next words with immense care. My world is full of people who approach me for my money and my name. I'm so tired of it. Since Mark died, I haven't had a single real friend. I just wanted, for once, to have a genuine connection. Someone who would see me without the billionaire tag attached. His voice was laced with regret. I know it was selfish, but I took the chance. I wanted to see what would happen. I'm so sorry, Elena. He had laid the whole truth bare, raw and vulnerable. Elena stood there, the anger within her dissolving, leaving only a profound sadness. You could have told me. In that town, I trusted you. I know, Damien said, his voice thick with remorse, and I ruined it. I'm sorry. A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, Damien spoke, his voice low and direct. Elena, don't leave like this, he said, his tone almost pleading. This trip started as a mistake, and I made a mess of it. Give me a chance to do one thing right. Just one evening, Elena agreed to stay. That evening in Paris involved no fancy restaurants or grand gestures. Damien seemed to understand that would only deepen the chasm between them. Instead, they walked along the banks of the Seine, just like any other couple. The lights from the bridges and the tour boats glittered on the water, creating an unscripted romance. They talked, but not about the future or promises. They talked about small things. The best French onion soup Damien had ever had, Elena's dream of backpacking through Europe. There was a silent pact between them, an understanding that tonight was its own separate world, a beautiful short story that would have to close at dawn. They cherished every moment because they both knew it wouldn't last. The next morning at Le Bourget airport, the atmosphere was more real. The private jet was ready, this time to take Elena to her real home. They stood facing each other at the bottom of the aircraft stairs. Thank you for boarding the wrong flight, Elena Morris, Damien said with a soft, slightly sad smile. Thank you for not kicking me off, she replied, her own smile tinged with a similar wistfulness. There were no promises to call or see each other again. They both knew their worlds were too different. Damien stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her cheek. He leaned down and gave her a brief, tender kiss on the forehead. It wasn't a lover's kiss, but a farewell, an acknowledgement, a promise that this memory would never be forgotten. Elena turned and walked up the stairs without looking back. 1 year later, the sound of classical music and clinking glasses echoed through a grand hall in the Louvre. Damien Carter, in a perfectly tailored suit, was smiling and chatting with a group of guests. He was no longer the reclusive billionaire running from the world. He was the host of tonight's charity gala, a foundation dedicated to funding medical research and supporting healthcare facilities in remote areas. He looked relaxed, open, and genuinely happy. In another corner of the room, Elena was engrossed in a conversation with a French doctor. She was no longer in her nurse's uniform. She wore an elegant dress, confident and full of life. After that fateful trip, she had enrolled in an international partnership program, becoming a coordinator for volunteer medical projects. This trip was for her to scout a new project. Their eyes met by chance across the crowded room. A still moment. There was no surprise, no awkwardness. Time and distance had softened everything. Damien gave a slight nod. Eleanor smiled back. It was the smile of two old friends, two companions on a short journey that had changed them both. There was no sadness, no regret, only warmth and gratitude for a beautiful memory that had helped them find their own right paths. They didn't need to say another word. Their encounter was over, but each of their journeys had only just truly begun.